Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Virgin Stars Podcast third season. All my loyal listeners, thank you for your continued support. This is an amazing episode because Fred Van Lente boards the mothership to discuss the Darques Soulside from Valiant Comics. Now come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Van Lente. Thanks so much for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's really my pleasure. So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired your love for comics and who your earliest influences?
My dad, for his birthday in like 1966, got a gift from friends of his that was Jules Pfeiffer's book, The Comic Book Makers. No, sorry, the comic book, The Great Comic Book Heroes. Sorry, long day. Uh, and it was an expansion of an essay he had written in the New Yorker earlier in the 60s about his time working for Will Eisner and like the comic shops, the early comic of the early golden age, or actually the late golden age. And this book, and this was like 1966, right? So Batman, the Adam West TV show, had come out. There's this huge wave of golden age, um, nostalgia. And so inside the book were these comic stories, all these golden age comic stories of like Hawkman and Wonder Woman and Captain America and Human Torch. And I just loved it. And I came along in 1972 and got my hands in the book when I was about 4, and I just made my mother read it to me over and over and over again. And finally, she was like, "Enough already! Like, find another book." But I would not find another book, displaying lifelong stubbornness. And so I just stared at the pictures and the words until they made sense. And I learned how to read before I entered kindergarten, thanks to not so much Jules Pfeiffer, more thanks to Bill Finger and Joe Simon, Jack Kirby, and Will Eisner. God bless them. But yeah, so I've been a superhero nut ever since.
Yeah, and like you are a fantastic writer. You've been doing a lot of work for Valiant recently. So how do you get involved writing Darques Soulside from Valiant?
So uh, I had written a book with my buddy Greg Pak for Marvel called Incredible Hercules. And after I left Marvel, I was approached by somebody from Valiant to write Archer and Armstrong, which was this buddy book. And as it turned out, I later heard from Tom Brevoort when they were talking about doing an Incredible Hercules book that paired him and Amadeus Cho together. They were like, "Will anybody buy this?" And Brevoort was like, "Yeah, it's like Archer and Armstrong, a comic I'd never heard of before." So it was sort of weirdly like kismet. And Tom told me that only after I took the Archer and Armstrong job. But I really loved the original 90s Shadow Man. And I attempted to pitch that because a buddy of mine Steve Ellis was drawing Ninjak at the time for Valiant. My roommate succeeded Joe Quesada as the artist on Ninjak back in the 90s. And so I'd never but they would never let me write Shadow Man at Valiant, the new Valiant, because I think they sort of associate me more with the comedic stuff. But Lisa Hawkins, the great current head of Valiant editorial, had mentioned when we were meeting about a totally other project, the Eternal Warriors book that also came out this month, that she was looking for someone to write a book about the Darks. I was like, me. And so she gave me the job.
And I think the great thing with you mentioned the Valiant from the 90s. Back in the 90s, for me, my Valiant was Solar, Man of the Atom. I loved
All right.
Solar quite a bit. And I think some people forget that for a window in the 90s, Valiant was as big almost as Image. I mean, Deathmate was a huge series, that big crossover. Were you reading just Shadow Man? Were you experiencing the whole universe at the time of the 90s?
I like Shadow Man because I love New Orleans and I love that whole setting. I think I knew a little bit about Shadow Man. Solar. I love Barry Windsor Smith. Reading Rune. Remember when he jumped over? I actually got my first comics job was for Malibu, writing Prime. And But yeah, I was in college in the early '90s and like dealing with my studies and trying to get laid. So I paid my attention to comics at that point was probably reduced to like Grant Morrison and Richard Case's Doom Patrol. That's the only comic I really kind of heavily followed, and so I kind of missed the entire Image thing altogether. And to a certain extent, Valiant, I probably wouldn't have known anything about Valiant had my roommate not been drawing.
Mm. And the cool thing is, like, you read a lot of the comic books for Valiant right now. You're kind of like the guy right now at Valiant. when you're thinking about Valiant in 2024, how just in what ways is it distinct from the Valiant of the previous current? Because I think people there was Valiant, then there was Acclaim, then there was Valiant again for a little while, and then at some point Valiant again after that point. I mean, there's been a few of these. What's the difference between now versus the past?
Though, if I follow you correctly, how is 2024 Valiant different than 2012 Valiant?
The different incarnations of Valiant over the last, I guess it's been 30 years now, different versions of the company that's come out with these characters.
Well, the current resurgence event that I'm doing with a bunch of folks um, is really a continuation of the universe that began in 2012. So it's not, a reboot by any stretch of imagination. It's a way to sort of bring back the characters in a way that maybe readers who'd fallen off during the time period get them back, and maybe bring in some new folks. Um, and what's fun about these characters is that the core concepts are still there, right? Exo Man of War is Conan gets the Iron Man armor. Um, Eternal Warrior is still an immortal defender of the Speaker of the Earth. Ninjak is still, what if Batman and James Bond had a ninja baby? It's all the same core concepts. They've just been updated for the 21st century. And it's fun to add new villains. We're trying to bring back pretty much every Valiant character that has been created in this wave with the Resurgence event. Pretty good track record so far, I think.
Is the continuity connected to some Valiant version in the past, or are we looking at everything starts from Resurgence with the Road to Resurgence storyline?
Nope, it's continuous from 2012. I guess the other major difference between the 90s, both the original and the acclaimed version, is that we don't have access to the gold key characters, right? That's Magnus, Robot Fighter, Turok, and Solar. Sorry about that, but above my pay grade. But yeah, so it's kind of forged its own universe, which has been really exciting.
So, in your series, it says in the first issue, it's promoted as the Road to Resurgence. Now, once again, when you connect to something like the Darques Soulside comics with the larger verse of Valiant, does it have to be? Do you have to read the other issues to understand the Darque series?
No, not at all. No, I mean, I certainly hope not. The Valiant, which is currently the creative sites being mastered by Alien Books, great publisher. They do a great job of putting background material at the beginning of your issue. So if you are totally new, you can jump in totally fresh. Yeah, no. The hope is to not just bring back readers who may have wandered away from the Valiant fold over the years, but to hopefully bring in new people and bring them up to speed on the universe.
Now, once again, Darques Soulside. Some readers, such as myself, who I've always dabbled around the edges of Valiant. For a little while, I was reading Ray. I think it's Rorai, however you pronounce it.
Right.
That 10 issue series before it stopped. I read Solar for a long time, Secret Weapons back in the 90s. So for those of like me who haven't been in a little while, in the pool in a little while, what is the Soul Side? What does that mean?
So, like I said, we're picking up from previous Valiant continuity. This character Shadow Man's arch enemies are a pair. Well, his arch enemy is Master Darque, who's this master evil sorcerer from New Orleans. He has a twin sister named Sandria, who is, if she might not be as evil as Master Darque, but she's definitely kind of amoral and kind of a bit of a wild card in her own right. In a recent Shadow Man arc, they were both banished into the Ring of Solomon, which is an ancient artifact mentioned in numerous cultures that allows wizards to summon demons and then put them back into the ring. And the ring has its own pocket dimension in there. And it's not called, and it's Soul Side, which is distinct from Live Side, which is where you and I live, and Dead Side, which is where Baron Samedi and Master Darque and all sorts of nasties live. So Master Darque and Sandria Darque are now trapped in Soulside, but to their surprise, they've actually found a rather nice home there. It weirdly looks just like a late 19th century or mid, maybe even pre-Civil War New Orleans, um, which is when Master Darque first arrived in New Orleans, which he finds rather odd. But the Jinn, the spirits who live in Soulside, Master Darque kind of treats them as like a traveling physician. And so it's really a very different change of lifestyle for him. And he's actually kind of enjoying himself, but of course, you know, as often been said, happy people make for bad drama. So the Darque's tranquility is shattered when Sandria, the sister, is kidnapped by Mama Gula, who is the head of one of the monstrous clans that rule Soulside. And in exchange for Sandria's freedom, she basically extorts from Master Darque to go penetrate the insanitarium run by one of her enemies and steal a magical artifact from there. And extorting Master Darque and manipulating him and doing bad stuff to his sister. Will this come back to bite people on the ass? I would say probably so.
Well, I think it's very fascinating, the idea of the Ring of Solomon, and it's suggested in the book that it was given by the adversary, which is obviously the devil. Even though in the Old Testament it's just known as the adversary, it's not known as the devil. But whatever, we'll go into the theology of it all that later. In your opinion, in your universe, did Solomon know that wasn't God, but the adversary who gave him that ring?
Well, it's Master Darque himself who says that, and Master Darque even says some people say it was God who gave Solomon the ring, but then some other people say it was the adversary. But Master Darque wasn't there, and does not have an opinion as to which it was. So I don't know.
Does Mr. Van Lente know the answer to this question as being the god of his Valiant characters?
I'm more of a demiurge, I would say. But no, I don't have an agnostic. One of the things you got to do as a writer is you can't commit to anything until it's on paper and published. Then it's locked in and canon. Until then, it can be.
Because the ramifications of who gave the ring to Solomon is pretty big. I mean, if it's God, it's one thing. It's using it as
Right.
to the adversary, that gives a whole other layer to it. So it is somewhat impactful how he got it and how much does he know about when he's using it, who it came from.
Possibly, but Solomon is long dead, and the ring passed into the hands of a Shadowman character named Punk Mambo, and she zapped the Darques into the Soulside arena. So the Soulside arena is neither, as implied by being different from Light Side and Dead Side, is very morally neutral. So I don't see any evidence other than the fact that there are harmless spirits and powerful evil spirits who exploit the harmless, but I don't see that as being any different than our world. It's just that in Soulside there's scorpion people and salamander people and bug people doing it to themselves as opposed to humans. I don't necessarily see that as being indicative of one thing or another. A lot of what that we know about jinn comes from Islamic mythology. And there's some questions there, depending. Certainly, more recently, Islamic scholars have considered jinn to be devils, or somehow inherently evil, like the way we think of demons and devils in Christianity. But the older traditions, because the traditions of jinn predate Islam, right? So a lot of the earlier traditions have a much more nuanced view of jinn and suggest that either they are just simply spirit creatures that don't have souls, or they can have souls and they're just sort of not they don't really operate on by our human rules. So that would possibly imply they're beyond the concepts of good and evil, and therefore neutral in the adversary versus almighty struggle.
So the great characters are in this story, like I said, is I'm gonna say the name wrong. Nicodema. Am I saying it correctly? Dark.
That's right. I think you did it right.
Oh well, the percentages were against it, but I got my best. Sandrina Dark. Now, my understanding is that they're twins. Their relationship is very kind of complex, and potentially it was hinted in the first issue that maybe slightly inappropriate. Am I right on that or not right on that?
I think that is correct. Yes.
So, but at the same time, Sandria, with the creation of Shadow Man and trying to escape Nicodema, has had a kind of adversarial relationship with her brother as well. So, can you kind of break down how complex this relationship is between these two characters?
Yeah, I mean, the one of the downsides to writing, in a comics universe where you're dealing with continuity and what other writers have done before you is a lot of times you don't agree with what the other writers have done. I get bored by cliches like the bad twin, good twin, or the brother's evil and the sister's good, and the I always get frustrated by the fact we need more good female villains. They always end up in superhero comics falling in love with the good guys and going straight, such as Catwoman and Elektra and so on. But I I just think it's more interesting if Sandria's relationship with her brother is different. And I don't want to get too spoilery because this has a lot to do with what happens in the second issue.
Okay.
But I think that Nicodemo and Sandria are both obsessives. Nicodemo is obsessed with power, and he's sort of more of the traditional world conquering supervillain type. But Sandria is sort of much more subtle in her interests, and may find Nicodemo, maybe in fact be jealous. Like what the world has to fear from Sandria is that she's jealous of it because she's in competition with it for Nico, as she calls him, Nico's affections. So, Nicodemo may want to control the world. Sandria may want to destroy it.
Now,
it's both shades of badness.
Would you describe as being codependent on each other?
Absolutely.
Because I think about the relationship. For some reason, I don't know why it came to my brain. I'm a fan of Supernatural when they talk about the Winchester brothers and how they're weirdly tight with each other at the same time. They have that, they're kind of adversarial. So in your opinion, Sandria, does she want Dark to be her brother to be successful, Nicodemo, or does she want him to only be around as far as she can be successful? How do you both? I don't know. I guess how can you rule the world and still want someone else to be successful who wants to rule the world too, but not it be you at that point?
Well, the problem with supervillains, right, is they have a very low success rate. They're constantly being defeated by the heroes. So I think Sandria sort of sees Nicodemus, particularly his obsession with destroying Shadow Man, as weakness. Is something he kind of needs to get over. So yeah, I don't think she would only want to rule the world to keep it out of Nico's hands.
Now, there's a hint from Nico that Shadow Man is in the soul side. Is he just kind of crazy and obsessive? He just sees them everywhere, or is Shadow Man on the soul side? Okay.
That's a spoiler.
Okay.
Maybe. Why not both?
My next question, I'm gonna get to butcher another character's name. I'll give it my best shot, but I'm probably gonna butcher it. Qualan, the mother of the guy who looks kind of like a frog, and
yes,
Qalan.
That's sure. I've never attempted to pronounce it out loud, so congratulations, you have.
All right, so
find the correct pronunciation for that name.
Okay, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
between you and your God.
So in this beginning of the story, Master Darque is very much helping the mother of Qualan. He's doing it. He seemingly is doing it for good reasons. He's doing it in a way that's maybe an altruist. What does he get out of it? Is he, because of the situation, finding without any need to conquer something, he's actually willing to do good things? What is the cause for him to seemingly be a good medicine doctor, as it were, in the soul side?
Well, it's a job, like he gets food in as payment. So the soul side appears to operate in some kind of a barter economy. and there's no currency, so you trade, services for goods and goods for services. So they have a basic sustenance level existence, and that's partly why he's happy and surprised that he's happy is that he's simplified his life.
So being able to do good things and feel good about doing good things for people, even though he's doing it as a bartering, does that have an impact on him and how he views his previous needs and goals?
Yeah, he's basically in prison, right? Like he's been trapped in this alternate dimension and he can't get out. And since he can't pursue his previous goals, killing Shadow Man and conquering the world, uh, unless of course Shadow Man happens to be there with him with Soulside, in which case perhaps one of those goals can be, pursued. You got to find other things to spend your time with, man. There's just, can't just stare at the walls in Soulside all day. So yeah, I think that he's had time to sort of contemplate. Maybe he feels better now that he doesn't have the whole world to worry about conquering.
Will that have a lasting effect on how he does view? Because I assume at some point he will end up back in I think he called it Earthside or Life Side.
Live side.
Life Side. When he eventually, I assume he's gonna end up back in Life Side because you're not gonna keep a villain like that trapped in a prison forever, and just how companies go.
Doesn't seem like a good idea.
So does that have a lasting effect on him psychologically? That idea of doing good things does kind of feel good.
Yeah, remember, all these characters, they're all kind of functions in the story, right? So as long as the story requires Darque to be a certain way, that's the way he's going to be, right?
Mm.
But as you point out, um, you know, we do have a tendency, both ourselves as people and particularly fictional constructs, to snap back to our factory presets, right?
Hmm.
And at a certain point, it does seem quite possible, if not likely, that Darque will snap back to his factory presets.
That's interesting about writing a character like Nicodemo or Darque, Master Darque. I always find it fascinating writing for a character with magic because magic is often indefinable. It's not like Spider-Man. So, well, he can lift a tank. Okay, that's his power. He's that strong. Magic is a little more, I don't know if the right word is nebulous about what it
Sure.
can accomplish. So when you're writing a character who's magic, how do you either ground it or define it in such a way that tension can be created when he's in a situation that's difficult?
Yeah, I'm kind of an obsessive about that myself. I always have to come up with a new magic system for everything I do. Like it's got to be logical is the wrong word, but it just seems like if it's just like Steve Ditko, Jazz Hands, which he did fantastically. It's not really my thing. So I came up with this idea that just because so much of Darque and Shadow Man's history has to do with New Orleans and voodoo. I hit upon the idea of using what in voodoo are called veves. They're often chalk, but sometimes they're white powder. Used grave dust or marble powder that you use to draw these elaborate symbols of Loa, of the spirits that you're worshiping. And I just sort of made that universal, and so it's a symbol based. It's like a drawing based magic system, which I think in a comic book works really well. And I'm happy to report, since we have put the second issue to bed, there is a very cool magical duel second issue that really explores these concepts, and it comes across quite nicely.
Well, like I said, I mean, fans, I guess, of like if you've ever been a fan like Doctor Strange, he does always seem to have a spell that's like just perfect for the situation. He's like, oh, there's a monster coming away. I can just use the anti-monster go away power, and it'll go away.
Yeah, I was in like more. I was in I was Marvel exclusive for a few years, and I was in the Marvel summits and stuff, and they would always argue about like Doctor Strange and his powers and about how they're too easy and there's no rules for magic, which, the bottom line is that's kind of missing the point, which is that yes, it's the same kind of thing when people complain about Superman that he's too powerful and it's not very interesting. And that is true to a certain extent, but all the good Superman stories, just like all the great Doctor Strange stories, are about emotions fundamentally.
Hmm.
I never quite buy that argument because it's not like Batman. Batman has like a 99% winning percentage, you know what I mean? And he doesn't have any magical power. So it's called plot armor. That's what the kids call it. So whether it's magic or just you're the protagonist, and so, you're probably going to survive. I get why people think it's cheating, but I think ultimately it's more that a story about a wizard or a sorcerer or a witch or whatever, it's still got to be a story about a person,
Hmm.
and that's what you have to care about, connect to.
And I really like the Insanatorium that you created. It's fascinating. And I would say the only thing that kind of bothered me a little bit is that we didn't get to explore it more in that first issue. Do we get more? Do we get to see it again? Do we get to more to explore? Because it sounds like the possibilities
Oh
are
yeah,
endless for exploration, and I was hoping there'd be more of it.
oh yeah, oh
Okay,
absolutely. Fear not.
okay.
I got you.
Another character in the story is Mama Trauma. What can you tell us about that character?
So Mama Trauma is a ghoul. Um, that is the Arabic spelling of ghoul, Ghul, not, I guess it's not technically Arabic. It's not using Arabic characters. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not the H.P. Lovecraft ghouls, right? Or the George Romero ghouls, which is Ghoul. Although Lovecraft based a lot of his ghouls from Pickman's model and other short stories on the Islamic version. I was reading an interesting thing about the old Arab legends of ghouls. And one of the things I liked about it was that there was one myth that said a ghoul could uh, assume the form of the corpse that he ate or she ate, and that's
Right.
something that happens in Dark's #1 by I gave that power specifically to Mama.
Villains that are worthy of a master villain.
No, um, it's well, what what I was very lucky about in the Darks was that the last person who wrote Shadow Man, Cullen Bunn, I think, uh, stuck them in a very interesting place. So I had a lot to work with. I'm always happiness when I'm doing research and saying, oh, they're in the Ring of Solomon. What's that all about? And you go down the rabbit hole of that. And so from there, I sort of realized, it would be fun to kind of put Master Darque in a situation. Well, number one, he's already in a situation where he's imprisoned, right? So that automatically means he's weakened, um, and then he's back on his heels. It's always more interesting to have main characters do that. Um, and then I just sort of figured out. And I also loved. I always got a kick out of the '90s Shadow Man game, the video game.
Hmm.
So I ripped off a lot of my ideas from that video game. They're not necessarily like the MacGuffin of the issue is this dagger called Eclipse, and there was an Eclipse dagger in the Shadow Man video game. So we haven't seen, and that's the Acclaim. That's arguably the Acclaim Shadow Man is arguably partly because Garth Ennis did it. Is the one version of the Acclaim, like that's the one character where the Acclaim version is arguably the superior
Hmm.
of all the different incarnations.
So, what can the readers look forward to in future issues of Dark Soulside?
Well, magical duels, more in Sanitarium. We get to see Mama Trauma for the first time. The mystery of the Shadow Man, 2 words, is solved, and we see how this plays into the larger resurgence of it.
So, what's next for you?
Well, I got a lot of fun stuff going on. I guess the main thing I'll plug is I have a Kickstarter going right now for my book I'm doing with Tom Fowler called Game Masters, which is the comic book history of role playing games. That's exactly what it sounds like. I'm known not just for my Valiant stuff, but I do a lot of nonfiction comics like Action Philosophers and the comic book history of comics. And this is very much similar to that. And it's the history of role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, which is enjoying its 50th anniversary here in 2024, with a collaborated Hulk and a bunch of other projects with at Marvel, Tom Fowler. And we look at the role playing game phenomena, which starts in the wargaming phenomena, which dates back to chess. So we go from like the 6th century to basically yesterday.
Very cool, Mr. Van Lente. It's been an honor to speak with you, sir. Thank you so much, and I hope readers pick up Dark Soulside. Think, like I said, I enjoyed the first issue, and I'm
Thank
hoping
you.
to jump more into the Sanitarium. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Yep. Enjoy.
Have a good night. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Fred Stars podcast. Please like and subscribe. Return for the next episode when Joe Quesada returns to the mothership to discuss amazing comics. Till next voyage, travel on.